Frieren Beyond Journey's End is one of the most positively received anime releases in a while. It's the first show that stuck in the #1 position, finally dethroning Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood by a pretty big margin. Yet, despite its positive reception, I have seen a lot of criticism levied at its tournament arc. And while I do think that criticism exists for a reason, I also think the tournament arc is outstanding and incredibly important. Welcome to a running series called Exploring Frieren. My name is Pei, and today we're talking about how first impressions aren't always right. So while I'm arguing that Frieren's tournament arc is a fundamental and important part of the story, many people struggled with it. But why? I think it primarily has to do with 3 points: pacing, change, and why tournament arcs are good in the first place. So let's start first with pacing. Specifically, that Frieren is an incredibly dense show. A topic I've talked about a lot on this channel, one that I plan on eventually making a video about, is how Frieren used staggered episodes to fit so many little stories in every weekly release. Some of my favorite plotlines in the show were fully explored in just 9 or 10 minutes. Obvious examples being Fern's introduction in the second episode and Old Man Vol, both of which I've talked about. I don't think I can express enough how impressive it is that Frieren is capable of telling these complex, interesting, deep stories with so little time. Which is especially impressive given that Frieren is a show that's pacing comes across as very slow. The primary criticism I've seen levied at Frieren is all around its pacing and not being interesting enough, which I think a lot of people who love the show find shocking given how dense it is. And I think that's showcased beautifully in episode 2 when Fern is learning magic against the clock, or in episode 16 when Old Man Vol is introduced. But they aren't isolated examples. This happens constantly in Frieren. Stark facing his fears in episode 6. The fascinating tie between episode 11 and 16 when they explore what it would be like to be a hero living in the world that you saved that's forgotten you. Or on the topic of heroism, episode 12 that explores the almost non-existent line between a fake hero saving the world and one that's predetermined. This show is stock full of little micro stories that are explored in just half an episode, and the initial reason why so many people struggled with the tournament arc is because they kind of abandoned that. Instead of telling multiple stories in one episode, it takes multiple episodes to tell one. The tournament arc follows much more common shonen anime pacing. Change in any capacity, but especially in a system that's working, will often be met with resistance. So whenever making change, it has to be worth it. But even if it's good, if the positive aspects aren't implemented quickly enough, audience members will be lost in transition. But tournament arcs are popular for good reason, which means that Frieren only had to utilize those reasons to make it worth it. The issue is, Frieren's story doesn't exactly lend itself to a tournament arc. So let's understand tournament arcs better. Tournament arcs are so popular for many reasons, but the primary 3 that I could think of were: number 1, it's an awesome chance to introduce a new ensemble cast of intriguing characters. Number 2, it places the hero in context. This is especially important in shows like battle shonens. And number 3, it's a remarkable opportunity to create fun, contrived situations that challenge characters in interesting ways that make sense in universe. Now, as we look at these 3 points, I also want to explore why I think Frieren initially seems like it won't be able to properly take advantage of them. And returning to our first point, ensemble casts and tournament arcs tend to go hand in hand. The cast we're introduced to at the start of the mage exam, I think, is in many ways purposely uninteresting. Frieren is a show that embraces a lot of cliché and then subverts expectations in the way they explore it. And its character design, especially in first impressions, is a bit bland. I made an entire video essay exploring how Zein's character design as a normal-looking guy actually embraces this idea. He's signaled to be a character that's unimportant, so when there's a large amount of depth, it's surprising. If you compare Frieren's character design to Yu-Gi-Oh!, Naruto, One Piece, or Dragon Ball Z, it's beautiful and in some ways kind of bland. Not bad, just undersold, and I think that's utilized very effectively by the writers. I think Frieren is a story that's very aware of its audience, and with the tournament arc, I found myself uninterested in a lot of the side ensemble cast that was introduced. It's part of what makes Frieren's tournament arc so good in retrospect, knowing who to care about in the large ensemble cast created, because those first impressions were incredibly wrong. There are obvious bigger examples that I'll be making entire videos exploring in the future, like Denkin as a character. But in a world of Gaaras and Rock Lees, Todorokis and Bakugos, Killua and Hisoka, Frieren's ensemble cast is deceptively unappealing, which is funny because they end up being fantastic. the dynamic between Ubel and Land, or all those little moments that make characters like Richter so much more interesting. Tournament arcs take advantage of hype and excitement about a large ensemble cast, but Frieren's exploration of the group is incredibly back-ended, better as the episodes go on. But another incredibly important part of what make tournament arcs fun is placing the hero in context. A fundamental part of most battle shonens is the protagonist getting stronger. It's like the core of what almost every battle shonen is built off of. Even the character's goals are so often a slightly altered version of just being the strongest. Luffy wants to find the One Piece and be the king of the pirates. Naruto wants to be Hokage. Gon wants to follow in his father's footsteps as a hunter. And Deku wants to be the greatest hero just like All Might. And all of these shows also utilize tournament arcs incredibly well. Because when a character wants to get stronger, you can place that character in context, having them face new, interesting opponents. The problem with applying this to Frieren is she's much more similar to Saitama than she is these other protagonists. It's a crucial part of the story, so it makes sense that the tournament arc would be less appealing. In a lot of ways, the stakes are undermined, but there's two really interesting and clever solutions to this. The first is in the misconception that Frieren is the only protagonist, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But second is in making Frieren an incredibly powerful monster of a mage. The decision to make a shadow version clone that they have to overcome is really cool. What a clever solution, and that exemplifies most of my feelings surrounding Frieren's tournament arc. On paper, it doesn't look like it'll work as well as it does, but in reality, I think it solidifies an incredibly important part of this show, that Fern is as much a protagonist of this story as Frieren. Because Fern as a character is being placed in context. We've seen some bouts with demons and monsters, but never comparisons to other modern mages. Because there's this huge running theme that's introduced in the second episode, titled It Doesn't Have to Be Magic, which explores how both Frieren and Fern have made magic a central focus of their life, purpose that draws them towards something every day. And that theme is explored beautifully in the many characters inside the mage exam. Take, for example, Richter's relationship with his small magic shop, Land's refusal to leave his hometown, Dinkin's remarkable and bloody political climb as an imperial mage, counteracted by the necessity to go visit a grave, Werble, who's used magic as a soldier, surrounded by death yet still sensitive to it. There are tons of interesting examples of each character's personal journey and also how that ties into their relationship with magic. But it's not just in the characters. Some of the best ideas that are explored in Frieren are introduced in the tournament arc. And when I think of Frieren's best moments, so many of them happen during the mage exam. For this running series I've been releasing now for months called Exploring Frieren, I've been approaching the story chronologically, and we're coming up on the final sprint. I don't plan on stopping talking about Frieren when I've completed this chronological 28 episode approach, but I do think there will be something really cool about having this full exploration of season 1. I made this video because there's so many interesting individual components of the story that happened during the mage exam that I want to talk about. Because if you really want to understand what makes Frieren's tournament arc so special, you have to understand its peaks. And that's what the rest of the Exploring Frieren videos are going to cover. The many outstanding moments that happened during the tournament arc. I'll see you next week.